Welcome to MMA Fancast, and I'm excited to have Indio Dojo fighter and now 2-0 MMA fighter Evan Dreucci back on the show. Evan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I've been honored to have you on the show before your amateur debut, and then afterwards you had a nice win in your amateur debut. You got back in there at Brawlenberg 16. Let's first talk a little bit about just how insane Brawlenberg 16 was. I know you had to have seen it completely sold out crowd, just an insane atmosphere. What was it like being in such a crazy atmosphere? Really build up the pressure.
Oh yeah, it was absolutely nuts. You try to. I at least try to. My coaches tell me they want me to block out everything, and try to just stay focused on the fight. But man, that it was really hard that time. Like my last fight was a little easier. This time, I walked out there. As soon as I walked out there, that crowd went nuts. There was I had a lot of supporters there. I really sold out a lot of tickets. But yeah, like it was so loud. I didn't even hear my walkout song until like they were checking my gloves. Then I like just got heard a little bit of it. But yeah, everybody was screaming in my face when I was walking. I was trying to stay locked in, but it's pretty difficult. And it was a heck of an event, heck of a show.
It really was. It really was a heck of a show. There were a couple times your walkout, a few of the other like hometown guys, you being one of them. You had sold a lot of tickets from Indio Dojo. I'm wearing headphones so I can hear Ryan on the commentary, and there were a couple times your fight included where the crowd got so loud we couldn't hear each other, which is exactly what you want. That's the atmosphere that really makes it pop. 247 has just been doing an incredible job. The event center there at the Meadows is such a great venue. So they also had you fighting sort of middle of this. Actually, you were midway through this monster card. You were fight 8 on 16 fights. And it's funny, some events, 8 fights is it. That would be the main event. But it did give you the opportunity to fight deeper on a card, because I believe last time you were pretty early. What was it like having to pace yourself and kind of have to like, or was I wrong? Were you not super early on your first one?
Trying to think. I mean, I think I was like halfway through on the
Oh,
first
you
one, but
were?
the
Okay.
first one there was only 8 people. I think there was only like 8 fighters. So yeah. But you were asking what it's like was pacing myself. It was pretty difficult. But I mean, I had my teammates there and my coaches. I mean, we stayed warmed up. We wrapped my hands a little bit later than what they wanted us to. They were telling us to wrap our hands at like 6 o'clock, and my coach is like, we ain't doing that because it's your hands get kind of like raw a little bit from all that tape on there. You don't get used to it, but it sucked. We had to share gloves. That sucked. I should have brought my own so we could have warmed up, a little more. But I mean, other than that, it really wasn't that bad. I mean, it went smoothly. It seemed like the fights were going pretty fast, so it really didn't affect me too much.
Yeah, there were a couple. There were 2 TKOs before. Actually, wow. Now that I'm looking back over, there were 4 fights that were all TKO or KOs prior to yours. So that kept it. A lot of them were in round 1, so that round 1 or 2. So that kept it moving. So very cool, because a bigger event like you mentioned, sharing gloves, that doesn't have to happen when there's only 8 fights, but with 16 fights, it's like a good problem to have. Same thing with warm-up space and all of that stuff. Those are good problems to have. But let's talk about the fight itself. You were going up against Travis Lemon, who was a debuter. What did you think about him before the fight? I would assume you didn't know much about him because there wasn't much on him. And what did you think about him as the fight was going on, as far as what was working for you, and if there was anything that was working for him that you were worried about and had to adjust to? It is a fight.
So he was pretty friendly to me, and I don't like that too much. I mean, we're getting into a fight. I don't want to really talk to you too much. I mean, I'll be respectful. I'm a respectful person, but like he was coming up to me at weigh-ins and was wanting to talk to me and stuff, and I was kind of like giving him like short answers because like it's just not natural, I feel like. But before the fight, he seemed pretty loose. He seemed pretty loose. He was enjoying himself for his first time. Like he wasn't real nervous, because I was looking into his eyes a little bit, and he didn't seem too nervous. Um, the whole time we were practicing, we were expecting him to want to grapple and take me down. We knew he wasn't going to be able to stand with me, and that's exactly what he did. He tried taking me down. He actually got me down for a second there at the beginning of that fight, but I got right back up, and I stuffed the rest of his takedowns, and he really didn't show me anything that surprised me. He was pretty decent in the clinch, actually. Yeah, I take that back. He had a couple good knees in the clinch that surprised me. I think because he was more lanky, had longer arms than me.
Yeah.
He was able to get that plumb, throw some knees in there. But other than that, I feel like I dominated most of that fight, and yeah, that was
Yeah.
about the only thing.
Well, yeah, you definitely did. You definitely did dominate most of the fight. I remember it was maybe right after that first, like, kind of like a flash takedown. It was sort of like he got you down, he popped right back up. He ended up, which is a very common thing. I mean, I know you're a wrestler, so it's a very common thing, particularly uh, trying to figure out the distance. He ended up shooting a lot way out, where it really wasn't feasible to land it, but that's something he's got to work on for the next one, figuring out the range, figuring, because striking in wrestling makes it tricky. Speaking of you with your high school wrestling background and obviously being a very good wrestler, what was it like for you, these two fights, your debut and this fight? Your takedowns and your strikes seem to be very fluid, but it can be tricky for a wrestler who's comfortable with wrestling distances to then adjust to striking distances. How has that been working for you?
It's just it's my teammates. My teammates really
Yeah.
helped me out. My coaches, all their knowledge. But that first fight, actually, I kind of looked like a rookie there. I mean, uh, my inexperience came out a little bit when he had me up on the fence. I didn't really know how to defend the takedown, and he did get me down that first fight. But I went back to the drawing boards and worked on that. And as you could see in my last fight, my takedown defense was a lot better. And to speak on the shots and stuff, like I know you're talking about distance and everything, it's also like timing a lot too. Like you want to time, like as soon as they throw a jab or something, time it coming in. You want to bring them towards you and then take that shot. So I was working on that at practices and stuff too, but I didn't really have to pull that out. I didn't have to fall back on that any. I kind of wanted to keep that fight on the feet because, like I said, I know he wanted to be on the ground, and he was comfortable on the ground. And when I would stuff his takedown, I was able to spin around anyways and end
Yeah.
up getting on with him. So I didn't
Yeah.
really have to shoot that fight.
No, yeah, you didn't really have to do it. It was more defensive, and I was saying on the broadcast, to go from sprawl control where you snap somebody down, and you've stuffed them. I think you said the word stuff. So sprawl control, stuffing them. But that spinning to take the back, which you do, wrestlers do it very well. For people that don't know, that's not the easiest thing to learn. There's a lot of movement. The guy you're trying to do it to is going to try to move as well. So it's a timing thing. I'm sure you've done it 10,000 times in wrestling practice, but it's something I always look for. There's also places you have to kind of grab on so that you don't like slide off the other side if the person moves. There's just a lot of little things, little nuances that sometimes people don't pick up on. So I always look for that, how quickly somebody can do a back take. A lot of wrestling drills or even just MMA drills, it's going from that front headlock position to back takes because there's a lot that goes into that. So hats off to you, but it was kind of good that you pointed that out. You're now 2-0, and that means that you're obviously putting things together well. So what Indio Dojo is doing great. You guys had 3 fighters on the card. You went 2-1, which is really good. As far as that goes. Hoot Lee and you were victorious. 10. Obviously, he's still got a bright future ahead of him. You got the KO brothers. You got a ton going on. The 13th wrestler ever in the state of Pennsylvania to win 4 high school state championships. Gavin Teasdale. You got a lot going on. But what do you want for yourself? Is it time to call out somebody? Is it time to start talking about the July 15 card? Because Monroeville Convention Center, I'm trying to get everybody excited about it because I think it's going to be really good. But what do you look, or are you going to try to throw a fight in before July? I have no idea. So that's why I always ask the question, what do you want next for you?
It's I've been talking, me and my coaches, we've been bouncing ideas off each other. We went up when we visited up Buffalo. We went up to LFA. We talked to the promoter there, and he was interested in us
Mm.
thinking, he was letting us know, wanted us to let him know how the fights go and stuff, and we'll go from there with that. And obviously, I'd like to get back on your guys' card. I really don't care. Like I said, I really trust my coaches and their
Yeah.
knowledge and everything. So whatever they think is good for me, whatever they think the right move is, I believe in that, and that's what I'm going to do. So it's up to them.
I mean, that's that blend, right? Between the confidence to get into a fist fight, the confidence that it takes, like you said, you zoned in. You got to have that mean mug type to you, but at the same time, sometimes fighters, we've seen it happen, sometimes fighters overdo it on the cockiness and then they start ignoring their coaches, right? So hats off to you. That's something, if anybody's out there wrestling, any type of athletic, you got to have that dog that wants to get out there, even if it's soccer, which is probably my least favorite sport, but my nephew now plays, so I have to like it. Yay, soccer. But soccer, no matter what sport it is, you got to have that switch, right? But if you leave that cocky switch on or that confidence switch on long enough, sometimes people end up ignoring their coaches. So I think you've balanced it really well to have that go. You're a fighter. You're an up and comer for sure. You got a lot of talent, but the humility to say your coaches are coaches for a reason. Danilo Villefort is a legend, particularly in jiu-jitsu, but he also had a great MMA career. It wasn't like his MMA career was bad. So I think that's a great way to kind of keep the future open. And that's why you have a great coaching team around you. So it's always an honor having you on. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yep, absolutely. I think that's a great thing that we have him in Pittsburgh. It's a great thing for MMA. And I mean, I'd even like to talk a little more about the fight. I felt
Sure.
very, very present this fight. Like my last fight, I knew what I was throwing. I knew what was going on. But this fight, man, I really I remember like everything that happened in that fight, and I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was throwing. There was a point where I was thinking, I was like, I think I'm gonna hit a Superman punch. I saw it. I was like, I have the opportunity for it, but I didn't end up doing it. But yeah, I really think I'm starting to click now. Like I really feel very comfortable in there.
So give an example of that, because a lot, that's vision, right? That's fight vision. That's being able to see things. It can take a long, long time, whether it's shooting a basketball, any type of thing. It takes a lot of time to see the vision of what you're seeing. Is that something that you started being connected to in training, or is that specific to a fight where you're starting to feel more present, or did you start to feel that in training as well?
So yeah, the sparring that we do a lot of play sparring. Like I mentioned past podcast, we do a lot of play sparring and stuff. So that really helps me get comfortable and see things. But my adrenaline was running this fight, but it was really really high that first fight. But this fight, I was able to really like break down and see different things and hit the combos my coaches wanted me to hit. And they told me too before I went in there to sting him with every punch, let him know he's in a fight. And I kind of think maybe I went a little too hard that first round. I mean, I put out a lot of volume that first round, so I was feeling it that first and second round, but it all worked out and everything went good. So
Well, talk about that a little bit, because I know wrestlers, when they're in their third period in wrestling, they kind of just know to empty the gas tank because they're almost there. When you said you kind of were feeling it in round 1 and 2 because you were really putting a high pace, high volume, you always want that balance to not punch yourself out. But were you also feeling it in the third round, or by the third round was it just kind of like you're going at that point?
the third round's really when I started off like feeling tired a little bit,
Mm.
like because like I said, I mean, I threw a lot of volume that fight and mixed in with the grappling. We grappled a good bit, and and I feel like that fight went on a longer than it should have. I mean, I know it's amateur rules and there's pros and cons to amateur, but if that was a pro fight, that kid wasn't going to be laying on his back like that. I mean, I would have been pounding in his face, so but what are you
Yeah,
going
and
to do?
that's where ground and pound is devastating. We saw that at the pro fight level, later on the card, and also the advanced amateur rule set, which was later on the card. You're really one fight away from the advanced amateur rule set, at least in Pennsylvania. And I've heard, I read some of the comments, and I understand that some of the YouTube channel watchers don't understand that Pennsylvania has 3 different rule sets. It's kind of confusing because we watch a ton of pro, and Virginia doesn't even really have amateurs, because even their amateurs fight pro rules, which I don't think is a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea for somebody who's never, dealing with the adrenaline dump, never been in an MMA fight, to suddenly be on their back eating elbows. So there is that balance of finding it. For you as a wrestler, being able to initiate takedowns and having ground and pound, clearly that's a huge advantage. It's one of the reasons why Gavin Teasdale kind of got his feet wet and then jumped right to pro, because he does have more skill sets with the wrestling, but it's always finding that balance. So it makes perfect sense that in a ground and pound world, obviously you would have dominated even more. But I will say, and this is Chael Sonnen, so take this with the biggest grain of salt you can find, because he's full of crap a lot of times as part of his shtick. He's a great guy. But I think he meant it when he said that as a wrestler, he thinks that in MMA, right? Because in wrestling, you pin somebody, but then there's a tech fall. And a lot of wrestlers see a tech fall as more dominant because anyone can get caught in a pin. We just saw Spencer Lee get caught in a pin, and he was winning that. Now, he had knee injury and some other stuff. He was very respectful afterwards, say that it wasn't, can't blame his injury. You know, the guy caught him, and hats off to his opponent. But right up until the fight ending sequence, he was ahead. Then he got behind, and then he kind of, so even there, you could say, oh, he got caught. But there's something about tech falls where it's so high. Mike Wilkins, who's from Stout, was talking to me about this in a BJJ tournament earlier Saturday. He purposely ran up like a tech fall in jiu-jitsu because he wanted that record, because it's a big deal. But in Chael Sonnen's case, he's saying that in MMA, he thinks a 30-27, which you got, he thinks a 30-27 is a tech fall type thing, because to dominate MMA, which has 18,000 different things that can be going on, right? To dominate, and we've seen it. We saw it with Izzy Adesanya when he lost the belt, how he was doing really, really well, but MMA is so complex that he lost it. So Chael Sonnen's point of view is, of course, he's a wrestling background, so that influences it. But his point of view is that a 30-27 win every round decision is like a tech fall, because it means that you were flawless everywhere and you didn't get caught here or caught there, and you didn't just catch him with this or catch him with that, as great as finishes are. What do you think about that? Obviously, I'm guessing you want finishes, but are you proud of big time decisions like a 30-27?
Oh, absolutely I am. Yes. It's hard for people that are just like not really fans of the sport. They don't understand how big of a deal that is. That's very difficult to do, I feel like. But I'm kind of, I don't know if you watch Joe Rogan much, but I'm kind of on his side. I think they need to redesign the whole point system in MMA, because, like you said, there's so much going on. There's so many different aspects. Just having boxing rule set, that doesn't make sense to me. But what are you going to do? I mean, you got to change it. It's been going on for 20 some years, almost 30 years now. So,
well, I mean, we could talk about this even longer, but one of the things, I think UFC, it's 25 years, but that's what's on the gloves right now, I think.
yeah.
But even back then, and MMA was around before that, what they did, and it makes sense at the time, but I completely agree with Joe Rogan. I've seen his breakdowns on it. The 10-9 must system, which is the boxing system, was just grabbed because boxing commissions already were respected, right? And so in early MMA, things were getting banned. There was that whole weird fight where these heavyweights had to slap each other because like an hour before the fight, they took away closed fists, which didn't make any sense. But there's all types of strange stuff in early MMA. And so one of the things they stuck with is, let's just use boxing, because when they went in front of all these commissions, they could say boxing. Well, boxing's been a regulated sport in the United States since the 1880s. And 400 years before Jesus, 400 years BC, boxing was in the original Olympics. Boxing's been around so long that they kind of wanted that respect that boxers had. But I think it's time to start changing the scoring set, because MMA is, to put it mildly, 10 times as complex as boxing. Not that boxing doesn't have its sweet science aspect, and it is beautiful, but there's so much more going on in MMA. I agree with you. I think they start to need to change it, but that is why they're stuck with a boxing scoring system, because 25 years ago, they just wanted to go with a scoring system, because there was a jiu-jitsu scoring system back then, but that's a lot more complicated, right? And when you look at, they didn't want to introduce that, because then people will go, well, we don't understand it. So it is probably time to change it, but
What are you
We'll
gonna do? I
see.
mean, what are we gonna? We're just a local promotion.
Yeah, yeah. And at the same time, what's great is, and this is Chael Sonnen's brought this up too. Man, I'm quoting Chael way too much. GSP is my man. I need to start quoting him more. But Chael Sonnen's also brought up that one of the things that you've seen is the more MMA is around in mainstream, the more people care about it, the more focus, the more attention, the more fighters learn and grow. I mean, skill sets that you have now as an amateur fighter. 25 years ago, you would have been a pro in the tournament, probably, getting towards the end of the tournament, right? Because that's no disrespect for Tank Abbott and people back there. They were doing the best they can with what they had. But when Art, I forget his last name, when he fought in UFC 1 with a glove on, for people that misconstrue that, he had the red boxing glove on in his fight against Gracie. It's in UFC 1. He thought he was going to break his hand by punching. He figured, oh, I'm a good boxer. I'm going to punch this guy so many times with my jab hand, and it was bare knuckle. I'm going to break my hand. He had no concept that there was a ground game component, and he actually tapped to full mount. He tapped to a position. Now, we could talk about this for a second. I can't ever think of a time where an amateur fighter in MMA right now, 0-0, would tap to being mounted, right? No strikes punched. He just didn't know what the mount was. And that shows, it's no disrespect to him, that shows that in 25 years, people have learned ground game, have learned striking, have learned ground game. And it's way harder now to come up through the ranks than it was, 25 years ago. That's just the reality.
Absolutely, and two, it's there's just like we have like YouTube and everything
Yeah.
like that now. So like people, some people are like self-taught. Like what? I think it was who's that dude that hit that UFC? Is that Buckley that hit that wild spinning back kick? Or
Yeah,
something?
yeah.
He like
In the Dana White Contender Series, the jump spinning
yeah, he
crazy
talked
Buckley.
about like he was like self-taught for like the longest time. Like wasn't a part of a gym or anything for like the
Yeah.
longest.
So was
Like
that.
that's
He's lost now, but so was that hillbilly guy, Thug Nasty. He was completely self-taught. I watched his videos. He just had some guys that were like country folks with him come so he could beat him up. But other than that, yeah, absolutely self-taught. And really just the invention of YouTube. That doesn't just go for MMA. People can learn piano and all the musical instruments. Now, I mean, one of my friends is a mechanic, and he says, if you're willing to spend time, you can change an engine out just off YouTube. I mean, it's crazy. So that goes a long way. MMA is, the bar is constantly getting raised because every time there might have been a Buckley 25 years ago, 30 years ago. We know Bruce Lee had crazy kicks and stuff, but that information didn't get out there as much. It's out there a lot faster now because of all of YouTube. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I enjoy hanging out with you, as you can tell. All the Indio Dojo, all the local gyms, just incredible. 247 Fighting Championship Bronzenberg 16 was their absolute high bar for sure. And it's great that you got to be a part of it and got to be on the winning side. So can't wait to have you back on, whatever's next for you. Thanks so much. You've been listening to Luke Basin for MMA Fancast with Evan Dreucci.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too, buddy. All right, bye.